Purpose, establish the emotional conflict immediately. Hook the viewer before they can scroll away. Before we get into this story, if you have never cried watching a game show before, I promise you that changes today. Hit that like button and subscribe right now, because what you are about to hear is one of the most unbelievable things that has ever happened on live television. We are talking about a moment that stopped an entire studio cold, made Steve Harvey forget he was hosting a show, and left 300 people, audience, crew, cameras, everyone, completely undone. Now people say you won't believe this all the time. On the internet, that phrase has almost lost its meaning. But I want you to stay with me because this story is not about a game. It is not about prize money. It is not even really about Family Feud. This story is about two men who lived their entire lives, 82 years each, with a hole in their hearts they could not explain. Two men who woke up every single morning with the same quiet ache, the same feeling that something important was missing, the same habit, the same music, the same soul. And they had no idea the other one existed. Until one Tuesday afternoon in Atlanta, Georgia, they finally met. What happened on that stage will stay with you for the rest of your life. Let's get into it. The Calloway family walked onto the Family Feud stage looking exactly like the kind of family the show loves. 5 people, big smiles, dressed sharp, bouncing on their heels with excitement. Leading the group was a man named Raymond Calloway, 82 years old, from Louisville, Kentucky. Raymond did not look 82. He moved with the easy confidence of a man who had spent his whole life in front of people, shoulders back, head up, a smile that reached all the way to his eyes. He wore a dark blue blazer and a tie that his granddaughter, Amani, had picked out for him specifically for this occasion. He had the kind of face that made strangers feel like old friends. Steve Harvey noticed him immediately. Beside Raymond stood his wife of 57 years, Dorothy, 80, a retired schoolteacher who somehow managed to look both completely calm and deeply amused at the same time. Their son, David, 55, a high school music director from Indianapolis, stood next to her. Then came Raymond's daughter, Keisha, 51, who specialized in genealogy and worked with adoption agencies helping families reconnect. And finally, Raymond's grandson, Marcus, 23, a music production student at Morehouse College who was practically vibrating with energy. The Calloways were good, sharp on the buzzer, quick with answers, generous with each other on the floor. They won their first round easily, and Steve could see why. They were a tight unit. The kind of family that had clearly spent decades around the same dinner table. During a break between rounds, Steve leaned over the podium and looked at Raymond. "So, Raymond, 82 years old, and you are buzzing in faster than your grandson over there. What is your secret?" Raymond laughed, a warm, full laugh that rolled through the studio. "Well, Steve, I'll tell you. When you have been playing piano since you were 5 years old, your fingers just stay quick. Everything else follows." Steve's eyes lit up. "Piano, now we are talking. What kind of music?" "Gospel," Raymond said without hesitation. "I was the pianist at New Covenant Baptist Church in Louisville for 48 years. I also gave private lessons on the side, taught maybe 400 or 500 students over the years, retired about 6 years ago from the church, but I still play every single day." Dorothy nodded, smiling. "First thing every morning, before coffee, before breakfast, before anything, he is at that piano. I have learned to sleep through hymns at 6:30 in the morning." The audience laughed, and Steve shook his head. 48 years playing gospel piano, that is a calling, not a job. Were you always drawn to it?" Raymond's expression shifted slightly, not sadder exactly, but deeper. "Since I was about 5 years old, yes. My adoptive parents had no musical background at all. No one in our house played anything. And then one Sunday, I heard the pianist at our church play the opening notes of What a Wonderful World, and something in me just woke up. Like a door opened that I didn't know was closed." Steve caught the word immediately. "Adoptive parents," Raymond nodded. "I was adopted as a newborn. My parents, God rest them, George and Mabel Calloway, were the finest people I have ever known. They told me I was chosen when I was about 7, made me feel like the luckiest boy in the world. And I was," but he paused. "There was always something, like hearing a piece of music that ends one note too early. Everything sounds fine to most people, but if you have the ear for it, you can tell the song is not finished." The studio went quiet in the way it does when something true is being said out loud. "Did you ever try to find your biological family?" Steve asked gently. "A few times," Raymond said, "but the records were sealed tight. Kentucky had strict laws. I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, and placed within weeks. I tried again in the 90s when my own children were growing up. Wanted to know what I was passing down to them, but I couldn't get anywhere. Eventually, I told myself I had enough. A good marriage, a good family, music. What more could a man ask for?" Dorothy squeezed his arm. "He'd never say it, but especially as the grandchildren started coming, he'd look at Marcus and wonder, whose hands are those, whose eyes?" Keisha, Raymond's daughter, had been quiet up to this point, but Steve turned to her. Keisha, you specialize in helping adopted people find their biological families. That must hit close to home. Keisha's smile was bright, but her eyes were glistening. It's exactly why I got into the field, Steve. I watched my dad carry this his whole life. I wanted to help other people find what he never could. And then about 10 months ago, I finally convinced him to take a DNA test. Raymond laughed softly. She had been after me for years. I finally said yes just to give her some peace. Best decision you ever made, Daddy, Keisha said, and her voice broke just slightly on the last word. Steve felt the shift in the room. He had been hosting television long enough to know when a conversation was no longer just a conversation. The cameras were all watching the Callaways now. Even the competing family on the other side of the stage had gone quiet. So what happened with the DNA test? Steve asked. Keisha took a slow breath. When the results came back, I was the first one to look at them. Dad asked me to review everything because I know how to read the reports, and there was a match that I was not expecting. She paused. Not a distant cousin, not a half-sibling, the closest match you can get outside of being the same person. The audience went still. An identical twin, Keisha whispered. My father has an identical twin brother, born the same day in the same hospital in Cincinnati, Ohio. Separated when they were only a few weeks old and placed with two different families. The gasp from the audience was audible. A woman in the third row covered her mouth with both hands. Marcus, standing at the end of the family line, reached over and put his hand on his grandfather's shoulder. Raymond closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they were wet. 82 years, he said quietly. 82 years and I never knew. My parents never knew. Nobody told them. Nobody told anybody. Raymond, Steve stepped closer, his voice low. I need to tell you something. Keisha did not just find this match and file it away. She reached out to our show. She has been working with our producers for months because she wanted to give you something that no prize money in the world could match. Raymond looked at his daughter. Keisha, what did you do? Keisha was crying now, not trying to stop it. Dad, your brother's name is Walter Simmons. He is 82 years old. He lives in Memphis, Tennessee. She paused to steady herself. And Daddy, he is here. He is backstage right now. The sound Raymond made was not a sob and not a gasp. It was something that did not have a clean name. It was the sound of a man realizing all at once that the note he had been missing for 82 years was about to be played. His knees went slightly. David and Marcus caught him from both sides. He's here, Raymond said, barely above a whisper. Right now? Right now, Steve confirmed, his own voice roughening. Raymond, are you ready to meet your brother? Raymond pressed his lips together. He could not speak. He just nodded. Steve turned toward the wings of the stage. Walter Simmons, come on out here, my man. The man who walked onto the stage moved slowly, not because he was frail, but because the moment was too large to rush. Walter Simmons was the same height as Raymond, the same broad-shouldered build, the same careful way of carrying himself. His hair was silver white in exactly the same pattern, thin on top, full at the temples. He wore wire-rimmed glasses sitting on the same nose. His hands, large, long-fingered, the hands of a man who had spent his life at a keyboard, hung at his sides. His eyes found Raymond before he reached center stage, and they both stopped. For a long, breathless moment, neither man moved. They just looked at each other. Taking in the impossible reality of seeing your own face on a stranger who was not a stranger at all. Lord have mercy, Raymond breathed. You look just like me. I was about to say the same thing, Walter replied, and even their voices matched, the same warm baritone, the same cadence, though Walter's carried the soft drawl of Tennessee while Raymond's had the rounded tones of Kentucky. Raymond took a step forward. Walter met him halfway. And when they embraced, 82 years of wondering, of that half-finished feeling, of that unresolved note, it finally resolved. The studio audience was in tears. Camera operators were in tears. The competing family on the far side of the stage was in tears. Steve Harvey turned away from the cameras, took off his glasses, and pressed his handkerchief to his eyes. His shoulders were shaking. In all his years on television, he had never seen anything like this. The brothers held each other for a long time. When they finally stepped back, Walter reached up and touched Raymond's face, gently, carefully, the way you touch something you are afraid might disappear. I felt you, Walter said, his voice thick. My whole life I felt you. I didn't know what it was, but I always knew something was there, something important. Me too, Raymond said. Every single day. Steve guided them gently to sit on the stage steps. The game format had been completely abandoned. No one in that studio cared about survey answers anymore. Walter, Steve said softly, tell us about yourself. Walter wiped his eyes with the handkerchief his wife had made him bring. I was adopted as an infant by Harold and Ruth Simmons of Memphis, Tennessee. Wonderful people, salt of the earth. They raised me with love and with faith, and I never went without anything that mattered. They told me I was adopted when I was about 8, made me feel chosen, not abandoned. He smiled. Same as Raymond, sounds like. And what did you do with your life? Steve asked. Walter's smile widened. I was the music director and pianist at Greater Light Church of God in Memphis for 44 years, gave private lessons on the side, taught somewhere close to 400 students over the years. The audience reacted before Steve could. The murmur that moved through the studio was the sound of 400 people processing the same impossible realization at the same moment. Steve shook his head slowly. Raymond, you played gospel piano for 48 years. Walter, you were a church music director for 44 years, both of you piano men. Walter turned to his brother. You play piano? Play it, David called out. He lives and breathes it. Walter let out a laugh, the exact same laugh as Raymond's, the same head thrown back, the same crinkle around the eyes. My wife Louise is going to lose her mind when I tell her this. She always said the piano was the other woman in our marriage. It was literally in your blood, Keisha said through her tears. In both of your blood. Steve consulted the notes his team had prepared. Both of you started playing at age 5. Neither set of adoptive parents played a single instrument. Both of you were raised in families with no musical background whatsoever. My parents were wonderful, Raymond confirmed. But music was a mystery to them. When I started picking out melodies on the neighbor's piano, they looked at me like I had arrived from another planet. Walter was nodding vigorously. Same in our house. My mother used to say I must have gotten it from somewhere because it certainly wasn't from her. She could not carry a tune in a bucket, God love her. The audience laughed through their tears. Steve continued reading from his notes, and each new parallel landed on the studio like a slow wave. Raymond had been married for 57 years. Walter had been married to Louise for 54. Raymond had 2 children. Walter had 2 children, a son named Gregory, 53, and a daughter named Sandra, 49. Both men had coached youth baseball. Both had served as deacons in their respective churches. Both had grandchildren studying music. Here is the one that is really going to get you, Steve said, looking between the brothers. Raymond, what was the very first song you ever learned to play on the piano? Raymond did not hesitate for even half a second. What a wonderful world. The pianist at our church taught it to me the week I first sat down at the keys. I have played it every single night before bed for over 75 years. It is the first song I teach every new student. Steve turned to Walter, and he already knew the answer because his producers had told him, but he needed the moment to breathe on its own. Walter's face went through something extraordinary. His mouth opened slightly, fresh tears came down his cheeks. What a wonderful world, he whispered. Louis Armstrong, I heard it when I was 5 years old and it never left me. I play it every night, every single night of my life. The studio was undone. Raymond reached over and grabbed his brother's hand. 2 82-year-old men, sitting on the steps of a game show stage, holding hands, connected by a Louis Armstrong song they had both been playing their entire lives without knowing the other one existed. Steve Harvey stood up, walked a few paces away from the cameras, and pressed his handkerchief to his face. When he came back, his eyes were swollen red. He did not try to pretend otherwise. He simply sat back down. Bring out Walter's family, he said quietly to his producers. It's time. Walter's wife Louise came out first. Small, elegant, silver-haired, with the kind of warm eyes that made you feel immediately at home. Behind her came Gregory, 53, quiet and steady like his father, and Sandra, 49, who was already crying before she reached the stage. Louise walked straight to Raymond and took both of his hands. I have been praying for you, she said simply. Ever since we found out, every night thanking God that Walter's other half was out there somewhere, healthy and loved. Raymond pulled her into a hug. Thank you for taking care of my brother. Honey, Louise said, patting his back. He has been pretty easy to take care of. Now I know why. Good genes. The two families filled the stage, and as they began to talk, really talk, trading stories and discoveries, the parallels kept coming. Dorothy and Louise had both been elementary school teachers before retiring. David and Gregory had both coached their sons' little league teams, both using the same 3-pitch count rule they each thought they had invented. Keisha and Sandra had both studied at historically black colleges, Keisha at Spelman, Sandra at Howard. Marcus and Walter's grandson Terrence, 22, pulled out their phones and compared playlists. 40% of the songs were identical. This is genetic, Marcus said, shaking his head. It has to be. Sandra stopped the room again a few minutes later. My dad has this thing he does. Every time he finishes a meal, he taps the table twice with his right hand, just 2 quick taps. He has done it my whole life. Mom used to tease him about it. David's face went pale. Are you serious right now? He looked at his own father. Dad does the exact same thing, 2 taps, right hand, every meal. Raymond and Walter looked at each other. I didn't even know I did it, Raymond admitted. Neither did I, said Walter. Until Sandra pointed it out 10 years ago, I thought it was just a quirk. Your hands know things your mind doesn't, Steve said quietly. 82 years of being connected without knowing it, showing up in the smallest ways. Then Steve gestured to his producers and a screen behind the stage lit up. The room went still. Raymond, Keisha has been doing more than just DNA research. She has been working with our team to dig into the legal records that were recently unsealed under Ohio's updated adoption disclosure laws. We want to share what she found. Keisha stepped forward, holding a folder she had kept in her bag since arriving at the studio. When the DNA match came through, I started working backward through the Ohio records. Our father and Walter's birth mother was a young woman named Cecilia Marie Hopkins. She was 19 years old when she gave birth to them at Cincinnati General Hospital in 1943. She was not married. Her family pressured her to place the babies for adoption. She specifically requested that the boys be kept together. Walter closed his eyes. But they weren't. They weren't, Keisha confirmed gently. The agency separated them, standard practice in the 1940s. They believed twins were easier to place individually. Cecilia was told both boys had gone to the same family. She went her whole life believing they were together. Raymond pressed his lips together. She thought we were with each other all this time. Here is the beautiful part, Keisha said. She unfolded a handwritten letter from the folder. We found Cecilia's younger sister. Her name is Aunt Vera. She is 93 years old, still sharp, living in a care home in Dayton, Ohio. When I called her, she wept for 20 minutes. She sent us this letter. Keisha's voice steadied, and she began to read. Dear Raymond and Walter, my sister Cecilia talked about you boys every single day of her life. She called you her music babies because she said when she was carrying you, every time she heard a song, you would both start moving like you were trying to dance. She sang to you constantly in those few weeks she had with you, hymns, lullabies, anything she could think of. She used to say those boys have music in them already. I can feel it. She never stopped believing you would find each other. She used to say those two boys are tied together by something stronger than any paperwork. With all my love, your Aunt Vera. The studio was completely silent. Steve Harvey was sitting on the stage floor, elbows on his knees, face in his hands. He stayed there for a long moment. Nobody rushed him. Music babies, Walter said, his voice barely audible. She sang to us. That is where it comes from. She put it in us before we were born, Raymond said with sudden, quiet clarity. The music, it was never random, it was hers. A photograph appeared on the screen, a young woman barely out of girlhood sitting in what appeared to be a hospital room. Even in black and white, the love in her expression was unmistakable, and unmistakably, around the eyes, she looked like both of them. She looks like us, Raymond said. Same hands, Walter added, leaning forward. Look at her fingers. A second photograph followed Cecilia as an older woman, seated at an upright piano in a modest living room. On top of the piano, framed in a small silver frame, were two photographs of infant boys. She kept you close, Louise said softly, wiping her eyes. All those years, she kept you right there with her. Keisha's voice broke as she shared the last detail. Aunt Vera told me that Cecilia played piano her whole life, self-taught. She played at her church. She played at community events. She played for anyone who would listen. The music was not just in your blood from the pregnancy. It was the family gift. It was hers, and she passed it on. Steve composed himself enough to stand. He walked to his producers, exchanged a quiet word, and turned back to both families. Both families are getting the full prize, maximum payout for both. No question, no debate. The audience erupted. The competing family, the Morales family from Phoenix, Arizona, who had spent the last hour watching history unfold from the other side of the stage, began clapping and cheering. The grandmother of the Morales family, Elena, 77, walked over and held both Raymond's hands. My brother and I were separated for 11 years when our family came from the Dominican Republic, she said. I know what it is to find the other half of yourself. God bless you both. Steve gathered everyone together one final time. Raymond, Walter, there is one more thing I want to see. We have got a piano backstage. I know because I trip over it every single time I walk to my dressing room. I want to see you two play something together. The audience cheered. The families gathered around. The production crew wheeled out an upright piano and settled at center stage. Raymond and Walter sat down on the bench together, shoulder to shoulder, the way they might have lain in a hospital crib 82 years ago. Raymond took the lower register. Walter took the upper. No count in, no rehearsal, not even a nod. They just began to play. The music that filled Family Feud's studio that afternoon was unlike anything anyone present had ever heard. It was not a performance. It was a conversation. 2 lifetimes of playing the same songs in different rooms, different cities, different lives, suddenly woven together into one seamless, breathing piece. When Raymond added a gospel run in the bass, Walter answered with a melodic line up top that fit so perfectly it was as if they had rehearsed it 1,000 times. When Walter softened into a quiet passage, Raymond followed instinctively without looking up. They played What a Wonderful World. and it sounded like it had always been written for two. By the time the last note faded, Steve Harvey was sitting on the stage floor again. He did not even try to get up right away. The audience was standing, applauding through tears. Both families had gathered around the piano, arms around each other, one unified group. Steve finally stood up. His voice was raw. In 30 years of television, that is the most beautiful thing I have ever witnessed. You two just played together for the first time in 82 years, and it sounded like you had been playing together your whole lives. We have been, Raymond said simply. We just didn't know it. Walter nodded. Every time I played alone, I think part of me was already playing with him. I just couldn't hear his part until now. The families stayed on that stage for nearly 2 more hours after the cameras would normally have stopped rolling. The grandchildren compared playlists, found overlapping favorites, and started a group chat before they had even learned each other's last names. The sons compared teaching methods and discovered they used the same warm-up exercise with their students, a rhythmic clapping pattern each man had always believed he had invented on his own. Louise and Dorothy sat side by side swapping sweet potato pie recipes. They discovered the ingredients were nearly identical, except Dorothy used cinnamon and Louise used nutmeg. We are making both at Thanksgiving this year, Dorothy announced. Side by side. Let the family vote. Oh, it is absolutely on, Louise replied, and the two women laughed together like women who had known each other for decades. Before the families finally left the stage, Steve asked both brothers one last question. What would you say to someone watching this right now who is adopted, who is wondering about their own story, who has been telling themselves for years that it is too late? Raymond went first. I would say, do not be afraid to look. I spent decades convincing myself I had enough that I did not need to know, and my life was full, it truly was. But this, he gestured at Walter, at both families filling the stage behind them. This is something I did not know I was missing until I found it. And now I cannot imagine going back, Walter added quietly, and it is never too late. I am 82 years old. Some people might say, what is the point at this age? The point is that love does not have an expiration date. The point is I have a brother I want to know, and however many years the Lord gives us, we are going to fill them up. Finding each other does not take anything away from the families that raised us, Raymond said. My parents gave me everything. Walter's parents gave him everything. We did not lose one family to find another. We gained. We only gained. Steve nodded slowly. This show is called Family Feud, but today there was no feud. Today there was only family, and sometimes family finds you when you least expect it on a game show stage in Atlanta, Georgia, 82 years after you were supposed to meet. As the families finally prepared to leave, Raymond and Walter lingered at the piano. Raymond played a few soft notes. Walter answered them. They went back and forth quietly, unhurried, not playing any particular song, just talking to each other in the language they had both spoken their whole lives without ever knowing the other one was fluent. Same time tomorrow morning? Walter asked as they stood up from the bench together. What time do you sit down to play? Raymond asked. 6:30, Walter said. Raymond looked at his brother for a long moment, then let out a slow, wondering laugh. Of course you do. That's my time too. I'll call you, Walter said. Every morning. You better, Raymond replied. We've got 82 years of conversation to catch up on. They embraced one last time, and the two families walked off the stage together, not as two groups, but as one. Steve Harvey stood alone on the stage after everyone had gone. He looked at the piano. He looked at the steps where the brothers had sat and discovered their parallel lives. He looked at the spot center stage where they had embraced after 8 decades apart. People ask me all the time what the best part of my job is, he said softly, to no one in particular or perhaps to everyone. They think it is the funny answers or the big prize reveals, but it is this. It is watching two people find each other and realizing that love was there the whole time, just waiting for the right moment. He picked up his question cards from where he had set them down hours earlier, looked at them, and laughed quietly. We never did finish that game. It did not matter. What happened on that stage was worth more than any prize Family Feud had ever given away. Two brothers found each other. Two families became one, and a song that had been playing in 2 different rooms for 82 years finally became a duet. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe right now. It takes 2 seconds, and it helps more people find stories like this one, stories about real love, real family, and the remarkable things that happen when the world finally puts right what was separated too soon. We have more coming. Do not miss it.